watching Hillsborough Television, programming that keeps you informed about the services and activities of your county government.
Hello and welcome to Beyond Today, the program that addresses the future of our community through conversations with people who are working today for a better tomorrow. I'm Ray Charmonti, your host for Beyond Today and Assistant Executive Director for the Hillsborough County City-County Planning Commission. In our last program, we looked at water and the new agency formed to deal with it, Tampa Bay Water. Today, we want to focus on community rebirth, in particular Tampa Heights and Ybor City, both historic sections of the city that are undergoing tremendous change. Our guests today are Fernando Noriega Jr., Director of Business and Community Services for the City of Tampa, and Clete Belsom, the Mayor's Heights Project Manager for Tampa Heights. Fernando, we'll probably start with questions with you because I know you have to leave before our show's over, but I'd like to kind of introduce our county audience to Ybor City, since Tampa's kind of the center of Hillsborough County and Ybor City's right in the center of Tampa. There's a lot going on there. Can you tell us about some of the new projects in Ybor?
Yeah, it's an exciting time for Ybor. You know, Ybor really and truly is a unique place. It's one of the three national historic districts in the state of Florida. And to be a national district, you know, you don't ask, they have to come and select you. So because of the historic fabric in Ybor City and the opportunity we have to make it really and truly a part of the channel and downtown, this administration specifically is focusing a lot of attention in Ybor, specifically because we feel that whenever you go to any large city, whether it's Boston or Baltimore or Charlotte, almost everyone that visits those cities land up in their historic districts, whether in a readapted warehouse or if it's not an old factory. So Ybor City has all that opportunity, and actually it's done pretty well in the last 6-7 years. So what we're trying to do is be sure that we are able to plan it so that it has a diversified use, and we've been successful because of the economy and because of the fact that there's a big interest nationwide in historic districts. And we have tried to really and truly put together a strong residential program, which has been out for bid, and it was accepted by Camden Properties, and they are going to build 450 units. Rental units, moderate to upscale. The rents start between $750 and $1,250, and they should be in the ground by the end of this year. They're in design right now. We're finishing our land disposition agreement with them. And then we have a large development, which is something very similar to Coco Walk in Miami, and it's Centro Ybor, which is the centerpiece of that development, is the Centro Español. Like Quincy Market and Faneuil Hall is the centerpiece to Harbor Place, the Central will be the centerpiece to that development. That development will bring in 20 theaters and an IMAX and considerable amount of retail. The developer, which is Yomar Steiner, teamed up with Mel Simler from St. Pete, which is one of the top retailers, and they've formed a strong partnership. And that development is approximately 52 to 55 million, and then we have our obligation, the city's obligation is to actually build a garage that will be in a very short time self-sufficient with a revenue of approximately $11 million. The Camden project is a $35 million project. Yesterday, as you know, we broke ground for the Ybor City Hotel, which is under the flag name of the Hilton Gardens, and it's approximately a $7 million hotel, 95 rooms. So when you put those projects together and you add to it the technical college that HCC is building, and it's halfway up now. And the corridor of Palm Avenue that is now going to, we're putting out 2 RFPs for townhouses on the corridor from Nebraska north and south and back of the Centro Estuariano. And the renovation of the German American Club for our city offices, we have approximately about $135 million in the ground by the end of the year.
Well, that's
So
great.
it's exciting.
It looks like Ybor's kind of going to its next stage. We've had the smaller redevelopment of existing buildings, but this is really kind of a new leap forward.
And it's really and truly exciting because when you take a look at the train station that has been completely renovated now, and it connects us really to the downtown area, and then through the channel with the development that's happening there, the port building, and on to Hogan-Burt development, talks about a suites hotel, and then naturally we have the 717-room Marriott next to our convention center. When you take a look at all that, and then you say, it's going to be seamless because the streetcar is going to make it all one area, we really and truly, within a 2-year, will be changing the whole character of that whole area, all the way from the CDB downtown to the Ybor City Historic District.
I'm glad you mentioned that 2-year, because everybody's talked about a lot of projects, and sometimes in someone's mind you think, oh, well, that's way in the future. But actually, with what you're saying, is all these projects are either breaking ground or ready to start, and in 2 years, most of them probably would be completed. I guess that would be a correct statement.
The Marriott, the convention center, their goal is to be able to celebrate the millennium in 1999 with the opening of the hotel. The streetcar is scheduled at the present time, and the streetcar has been funded and it's been approved by council the first quarter of the year 2000. The Steiner project is in the first quarter of the year 2000. The hotel will be ready most probably by October of '99 or a little bit before. So these are real projects there. Camden feels that theirs will be ready most probably by the end of 1999. That's not taken into consideration. There's many other projects going on.
That are smaller.
Yeah.
You mentioned the HCC Technical School. I was unfamiliar with that. What is that going to
It's
be?
an addition to their campus, and it's going to be a technical computer and other types of administrative. Very important. People don't realize, sometimes we talk about the different assets we have, but we don't realize that HCC has 44,000 students, and of those 44,000, Ybor City campus plays a large portion of that opportunity with minorities. We also have the challenge that we're not used to having in the South as many urban colleges as we do, NYU and Chicago and all, So we sometimes the concept is that HCC and the Historic District and the Entertainment and Arts District are not compatible. But we really are working now, and we find it to be very compatible. Miami-Dade is in the middle of downtown Miami, and it does real well. So we're really and truly working in a partnership we hadn't worked with before with HCC and Dr. Stevenson.
I think that is a good point, because I agree with you. I'm not sure the South is used to the large urban school, which is prevalent in cities like Chicago and other places. And that's good that that's being reinforced here, because I would think the students would add a lot to Ybor's life and people to inhabit, the residents you talked about. Going a little bit more into that, and Ybor being a historic district, I know that has to create issues of what to preserve and what to redevelop. How do you deal with that, I guess? It must be very difficult.
It's a design control with the Barrio Latino Commission, and before we can issue any permits in the Ybor district, it has to be approved by the Barrio, whether it's small alterations or major renovations or a new construction, and that protects the district. It's another layer of that you have to go through the process but it really assures us that the district will be well protected. So we really depend on the design review by the burial to keep the character of the buildings in place. It is an added expense, but it's also a very appreciative area from the tax sources. It's really not as difficult sometimes as it looks, or as expensive as you would think, but it takes a lot of work because the infrastructure has to be complementary to the signage, as well as the street, as the curbs, the sidewalks. It's a historic district that needs to be sure that we give it the respect it deserves.
Do you deal with the rest of the city also in redevelopment areas?
Yes.
Because it appears to me that residential development is kind of, I know South Tampa, I see more new houses going up there, and Seminole Heights seems to be coming back. Do you sense somewhat of a rebirth for the corporate limits of old Tampa?
Oh, I think so. I think several things are really and truly responsible for that. I think the most important one is naturally the travel and the distance and the traffic, and the inner cities are becoming more attractive. There's been a whole change in philosophy and in character. In the 60s and 70s, everybody wanted to get away into the Donna Reed neighborhood with a white picket fence in the suburbs, and there was no real appreciation for wood structures or frame structures or front porches or tall ceilings or metal roofs. And you know, we all, at least people my age, wanted to get away from that. And now I see my children and my grandchildren saying what a neat house that is, and look at the big porch and look at how tall the ceilings are. They're not worried that there's termites or that it's going to be hard to upkeep and that there's mildew to worry about. So I think that there's a whole renaissance of historic preservation and living in the inner city that's attractive to that I think has taken maybe 2 or 3 decades to educate people that it has a sense of belonging. So I think that we're going to experience a real return to the inner city, especially in neighborhoods that have character, like Seminole Heights, right. Hyde Park, Tampa Heights. We have in the last 30 years of doing extensive renovations and neighborhood development, we have never experienced the attitude from any area that we have done like in Tampa Heights. There's just an excitement about wanting to live in Tampa Heights.
Great.
That is unbelievable. Right. So I think that there's several reasons. First is the infrastructure. There's water, there's sewer, there's streets, and there's lights. And in today's world, you know, it's very hard to be able to do the improvements necessary because of the high cost. So I think that's one of the reasons. The other one is that you're in the middle of, you know, where the action is.
Right. Well, we have to take a break now. I'd certainly like to thank you for coming and talking to us about it. It's kind of exciting as a planner to hear about this rebirth that's occurring, because I kind of see it too, so it's good to have that reinforced. We'll be back in a minute with our guest, Clete Belsom from the city, to talk about Tampa Heights. Welcome back to Beyond Today. I'm your host, Ray Shermonti, and we've been discussing the rebirth of historic Tampa areas such as Ybor City. We're going to talk a little bit about Tampa Heights now with Clete Belsom from the city of Tampa. Clete, how long have you worked for the city?
Been with the city for about 12 years. Prior to that, I was with a firm by the name of Alpha Business Consultants, and we work with medium-sized business acquisitions throughout the Tampa Bay area, a lot of it in Pinellas County. Prior to that, I was in the Air Force for about 21 years, had somewhat of an academic background, taught at West Point on a tour with the Army, taught economics and government and finance. And when I came to the city, I came in the capacity of a financial officer with the Challenge Fund program. About that time, the Challenge Fund was just getting off the ground, working hand in hand with the commercial banks to essentially leverage the government subsidies that we have for housing programs.
Well, I think it's interesting that you have a financial background. I think the public always likes to hear that people with a business background are involved in government. I certainly think that that's an asset. For the benefit of our viewers at home, can you tell us a little bit about the Challenge Fund? We hear that term. I'm not sure that the average person understands exactly how that works.
Well, in the widest sense, it sort of describes the city's affordable housing programs. And by and large, it refers to, on the one hand, the relationship with the commercial banks, where first mortgage money is obtained, and on the other hand, the whole program where we marry the commercial bank money in first position loans or mortgages with second position loans that are made with housing subsidy funds. And usually those second mortgages are on a deferred payment basis so that they don't actually amortize. They sit there in second position. When the property is eventually sold, at that time then the city gets repaid those funds. But it allows an individual to acquire home ownership with affordable monthly payments because they're paying on a much smaller first mortgage. So by and large, that's pretty much quick and dirty description of the Challenge Fund.
Now, does the Challenge Fund just deal with new homes or existing homes? How does it?
Well, it really works with or through an inventory of homes that are purchased or acquired by a number of nonprofit groups in the city, and they take those homes. If they're existing homes, they renovate them, put them back out on the market, and we finance them through the Challenge Fund. On the other hand, oftentimes the nonprofits will actually function as real estate developers and will develop scattered site housing, which we call infill housing, or they've actually done subdivisions, small subdivisions, and those have had a big impact, particularly in East Tampa, where there's very little new construction for just years and years, and all of a sudden they went in and put on the ground subdivisions consisting of anywhere from 10 to 30 houses. So that was really a new experience for those inner city neighborhoods, and had a real impact on creating comparables then, so that other properties could then sell and appraisals could be done that made sense, because up until that time so little new housing existed. So it's all done sort of hand in hand with 5 or 6 nonprofit groups that are very active in the housing area.
So it's almost kind of a guarantee of a backup of the financing to a commercial bank that's really lending the money.
Exactly. Yeah, in that regard, I think the city of Tampa is very unique, because in the case of those first position loans, the city does guarantee those loans for the first 5 years. So that brings the bankers to the table, or the credit unions to the table, to make those loans at a reduced interest rate, and it's somewhat of a more liberal underwriting policy, because sometimes the lower income groups may have some credit problems, and the banks and the credit unions are willing to work with that by and large because that guarantee is there.
Now, the Challenge Fund, I guess, is going to be a major part of the redevelopment effort in Tampa Heights, which I really did want to talk about today.
It will be, but I would say that in Tampa Heights, I think the approach is certainly very market-oriented, in the sense that, again, the city is working with a number of nonprofits that are acquiring land throughout the Tampa Heights project area. They will then flip those properties essentially at the same cost, or at an average square foot cost, by sub-area within the whole project area. So the idea is to acquire the properties quickly, flip them over to potential home buyers or builders, and many of those folks will be market rate buyers, would require no subsidy, no guarantees. So in that regard, the Challenge Fund will be important, because we have a relationship that we've established with the lending community over the last 10 years.
Now, what are the boundaries of Tampa Heights?
The boundaries are essentially Columbus Avenue on the north, I-275 and I-4 on the south. On the west, it would be North Boulevard and the Hillsborough River. And then on the east, it would be essentially Nebraska Avenue until you get up near Palm Avenue, and then it sort of takes a little run into Ybor City, or what we normally would think of as Ybor City, that little pocket that's created between Palm Avenue and I-4 behind the German American Club on Nebraska. So that's about a 130 square block area.
Okay, so it's a number of acres. And what is the population of that area now?
Population is about 6,000, probably have about 2,500 households throughout the whole area. A lot of vacant parcels. And of course, that's primarily what we have focused on in terms of acquisition.
Now, are most of the vacant parcels at this time owned by nonprofits or the city? What percentage would you say?
At this point, there are so many vacant parcels that we or the nonprofits probably own about 275 or so. But there's still a lot of other opportunities out there. So certainly, one of the unique things that we're going to do is we've acquired a piece of property on Palm Avenue. I think it's 400 East Palm Avenue. A lovely old house in need of a lot of restoration. What we're going to do is work with a developer who will essentially restore that house, and for the next 4 years we'll make that property available rent-free to the local civic association and to a couple of these nonprofits. And we'll use that as a center for the civic association and as a marketing center. So we'll have a nice room in that old house, which represents every house in the area. A potential buyer can come in, get information, get a feel for what can be done with those houses.
You know, that's, I think, an excellent idea, because one of the areas I think that's difficult for a city to compete with new suburbs is if you go out to a new development. I mean, if you have this huge marketing mechanism in place and a model center, but I mean, that's a great idea, because that is a drawback. When you're in the city, you're kind of on your own, but that would solve that problem.
Well, you know, the local residents tell us that every Saturday and Sunday there's almost a constant stream of automobiles that sort of cruise the area very slowly, and they'll stop and ask questions about living in Tampa Heights. And this will give us a focal point. And the Civic Association has agreed that they would actually man the facility on weekends so that they would be available to talk to folks who would be interested in buying in Tampa Heights. So it looks like a great plan.
That's great. Now, when do you think that'll take place? What is the timing on that
That'll
house?
be in what we would call phase 2, where phase 1 right now is essentially that property acquisition phase that we're involved in right now.
And about when will you
probably
acquire it?
I would say that in sometime in mid-July we would move into phase 2, where we would start to, at that point, be able to have acquired enough properties so that we can come up with some representative square foot prices by different sections within the whole project area, so that we will know essentially this is the kind of price that we'll have to ask for this particular property. And then we'll go to market with that. We have a number of architects and marketing firms that have volunteered to provide some assistance too. So we hope that certainly by August anyway, late August, that house ought to be completed, but we'll start marketing before that. But I would think that that facility ought to be ready certainly by the end of August.
Of this year.
Of this year.
So someone could go in there really at the end of summer and get an idea of what's going to happen.
Exactly.
Now, as far as your housing programs, I know a lot of the Challenge Fund is like one house here and then one house over here. Are there going to be any areas at Tampa Heights where you might take like half a block or 6 lots and do, you know, 6 houses at one time? Is that going to occur?
Absolutely, absolutely. Fernando mentioned one, and that would be right along Palm Avenue as you enter Ybor from Nebraska, between the Centro Storiano on the south and the German American Club on the north side of that Palm Avenue entrance, which incidentally is going to have a gateway erected, sort of the official entrance to Ybor City. But in that little pocket that I described earlier, we will put a row of townhouses in there right along the north side of Palm. They'll be moved up to the very front of Palm, sort of in the old-fashioned way that houses were sited, and the automobile access will then be from the rear. So those will be all along Palm Avenue.
Now, how many of those are there going to be?
I'm not really sure at this point what we'll be looking at there. I would estimate anywhere from 10 to 20.
So that would be done as a coordinated project that people could own the townhouse?
Yes. Then right across from that, we're looking at probably somewhere in the area of about 250 apartment units that will go in that large open space behind the Centro Storiano.
Okay.
And then as you move to the west...
Now, what kind of apartments would those be?
Those will be market rate, by and large market rate apartments. They're looking at the possibilities of a major supermarket going in right around 7th and Nebraska, which will happen as soon as these housing starts begin. Then certainly the the folks will go in with.
So really, in Tampa Heights, that's the first area where we're going to see actual activity.
If you're the east, and then as you jump across Nebraska, there's a zone between Nebraska and I-275 that we will be doing anywhere from about 70 to eventually almost 100 single-family homes in that area. There are a lot of vacant lots in there right now, and we see an enclave of small homes built in the cigar worker style with hardwood floors and nice, very modern inside, but with front porches, sort of like Fernando was describing. Front porches, some will have automobile access from the rear, some will have on-street parking. There'll be probably some sort of small wall that will go around the community to give it an identity, some gateway signs, probably only have 3 or 4 entrances into that particular section.
That's great. That's very exciting. Between Ybor City and Tampa Heights, we are seeing a lot of things happening. I'll be anxious to see it actually occur. I'd like to thank today's guests for talking with us about community rebirth, and thank you, Cleet, for joining us. We'll see you next month with a new topic. If you have comments, let us know about today's show. Please call our hotline or let me call our email at the Planning Commission. I'm Ray Shermonti. On behalf of the Planning Commission, I thank you for thinking beyond today.